What if Obi Wan had actually underestimated Anakin's power on Mustafar? Let's find out. So everything would play out just as it did in the original timeline until Obi Wan takes the high ground, telling Anakin that their fight is over because he, Obi Wan, has the high ground. And as a response, Anakin would say, "You underestimate my power." Following which Kenobi would tell Anakin to not try it. But determined to prove to Obi-Wan that Obi-Wan was underestimating him, Anakin leaps over Obi-Wan with the intention to kill Obi-Wan, similar to how Obi-Wan killed Darth Maul all those years ago on Naboo. And so, Anakin leaps across Kenobi, but Kenobi immediately recognized what Anakin was trying to do. In fact, Obi-Wan was almost manipulating Anakin into doing this exact same thing. And so, as Anakin jumped above him, Obi-Wan attempted to use Mo-K, a lightsaber technique which literally translates to dismember. So Mo-K was a finishing move in lightsaber combat, which was accomplished by directly attacking the limbs of one's opponent. If executed successfully, Mo-K would leave one's enemy completely incapacitated while not killing them. Due to the embarrassing defeat that Mo-K could deliver to one's enemies, it was a move favored by the Sith and forbidden by the Jedi. But Obi-Wan Kenobi's goal here was to destroy Darth Vader no matter what, and the rules of the now fallen Jedi Order didn't matter much to Master Kenobi. So as Anakin leapt across him, Obi-Wan took aim at Anakin's legs and his arms, and as Anakin approached him, Obi-Wan struck Anakin, but Obi-Wan only managed to remove one of Anakin's limbs, that to his robotic hand, which Anakin held his lightsaber in, and despite this, Anakin still managed to land on his feet above Obi-Wan, taking the high ground away from his old master. Obi-Wan would then quickly retaliate and try to go for Anakin's head, but this is when Obi-Wan found out that he had indeed underestimated his old Padawan, because before Obi-Wan could land a strike on Anakin, Anakin pushed Obi-Wan into the river of fire beneath, and as a result, Obi-Wan went flying into it, losing the grip on his lightsaber and dropping it before he fell into the lava and died. And so, Anakin, or Darth Vader, would watch as his old master became one with the Force, and also with the lava. Anakin would then stand there for a long moment, and as his anger began to fade, he asked himself what he just did. But Anakin quickly removed this thought from his mind and started walking back up to Padme. Anakin would then, for reasons he couldn't really explain, call Obi-Wan's weapon to himself with the Force, and then walk back to the landing platform where his wife, Padme, lay unconscious. And as Anakin was walking up to his unconscious wife, and also R2 and C-3PO, who were near Padme, Anakin sensed his new master, Darth Sidious, approaching. And soon enough, Emperor Palpatine would arrive on Mustafar on a Theta-class T-2C shuttle, and by the time Sidious had exited his shuttle, Anakin had also made his way to the landing platform and Padme. When Sidious saw Anakin, he would remark how he, Sidious, was worried about Anakin, who Sidious was addressing by his new Sith name, Lord Vader. As a response to this remark by Sidious, Anakin would stay silent, only responding with a glare at Sidious. Sidious would then glance at the unconscious Padme Amidala and would quickly order his guards to get Padme into the shuttle and get her the medical help needed so that she may recover from the attack by Obi-Wan Kenobi, whose presence Sidious would sense on Mustafar. So Sidious would try to pin everything onto Obi-Wan, because Sidious could also sense that Obi-Wan wasn't going to come back to defend himself. And so, following Sidious's instructions, his guards would take Padme into his ship, and also C-3PO, who would follow Padme. And as the Red Guards took Padme into Sidious's shuttle, Anakin wouldn't look too concerned, because even now, Anakin believes that Padme had brought Obi-Wan to Mustafar to kill him. And Anakin would share this with Sidious, telling Sidious that Padme had betrayed him. But as a response, Sidious, seeing as how Padme can still be used to manipulate his new apprentice, would tell Anakin that Padme may have been manipulated by Obi-Wan. Hearing this, Anakin would look at Sidious, and Sidious would go on to say that manipulation and lying were something that the Jedi were extremely good at, and that Padme, like many others, fell victim to this manipulation, now being able to see through the lies of the Jedi, and that Anakin should give Padme a chance to see the truth. As Anakin listened to all this, he would feel as though Sidious was describing himself, and not the Jedi. And then Sidious would notice that Anakin was holding Obi-Wan Kenobi's lightsaber, and this would bring a smile on Sidious's face. He would tell Anakin that he's almost a perfect Sith, because a Sith lightsaber is not given, but rather taken. And Sidious would go on to tell Anakin that a Sith lightsaber is made red by bleeding the Kyber crystal inside a Jedi's lightsaber. But Anakin would seem uncaring to all of this information, and without saying much, he would simply walk over to the starfighter, telling Sidious that he will arrive on Coruscant on his own. Because still, Anakin didn't want to abandon R2, and he would also feel as though being around Padme in the state that he was in wasn't a good idea, and Sidious would of course agree, telling Anakin that they will meet soon. But before walking over to the starfighter and leaving, Anakin did consider, for a moment, cutting Sidious down right then and there, on Mustafar. But even in this anger state, Anakin knew that he couldn't kill Sidious, because if he did so, he wouldn't be simply made Emperor. Because the Republic, even though it has been rebranded as the Empire, was still nothing like, say, the Mandalorian Society, where anyone could challenge and defeat the current leader in single combat to become the ruler of Mandalore. And so Anakin had to wait. He knew this, and on top of that, Anakin still needed Sidious alive to save Padme, who Anakin still wanted to save, because he did still love her. And as he left Mustafar on a starfighter with R2, his anger would begin to fade further, and Anakin would begin considering if Obi Wan had somehow snuck aboard Padme's ship without her knowing. Infiltrating separatist ships were something that Obi Wan and even himself had done multiple times during the Clone Wars. And so, with all this going through his mind, Anakin would make his way to Coruscant. Polis Massa is an asteroid field located in the outer rim of the galaxy, far from any major hyperspace lanes. And inside an artificial habitat on Polis Massa, Master Yoda sat in deep meditation. And as he did so, Yoda, through the Force, felt the end of Obi Wan, which confirmed to Yoda his worst fears. Darth Vader lives, as does his master Darth Sidious, who Yoda had failed to defeat on Coruscant. And now, as Yoda sat in this forgotten corner of the galaxy with no purpose left in his old age, Yoda would decide to go after Sidious again and finish what he couldn't before. And so with that decided, Yoda leaves his meditation and requests Bail Organa to take him back to Coruscant. And even though Bail argues against this, Yoda would insist, and Bail would ultimately relent. Back on Coruscant, a little while later, Anakin would be waiting outside Padme's hospital room in the Grand Republic medical facility. And as he stood there, Anakin's mind would be going through everything that happened recently. He betrayed Mace Windu at the Jedi Order, killed every single Jedi he could in the temple, including the younglings. He did all of this to have a chance at saving Padme, and yet she was now in the hospital because of him. And by this point, Anakin would also come to know that Obi Wan had indeed infiltrated Padme's ship after examining the ship's internal surveillance footage. So basically, Anakin knew by this point that Padme did not try to betray him. Instead, now, all of Anakin's anger would be directed towards himself for hurting Padme and putting her in the state she was in right now. If she dies now, it would be because of him. He would be the reason for his visions coming true. But brushing all these thoughts aside, Anakin would decide to contact Sidious, who by this point had gone to the Jedi Temple to witness the burning of the Jedi lightsabers. For Mas Amedda was busy declaring that the Clone Wars had ended, and also that the Jedi Order tried to betray the Republic, and was punished for this action. Meanwhile, Master Yoda had arrived on Coruscant with the help of Bail Organa, and Bail gave Yoda a quick rundown of everything that happened on Coruscant, especially the fact that Palpatine had decided to make the Jedi Temple his personal quarters, essentially turning the temple into an imperial palace. This was Palpatine's way of adding insult to injury, Yoda would think. And then Bail and Yoda, who were on a speeder, would get even closer to the Jedi Temple, and Yoda would be able to witness the burning of the Jedi lightsabers in front of the temple. And despite everything that happened, it is at this moment that Yoda fully realizes the gravity of his failure. The order that had stood for over 25,000 years had fallen, and it happened under his watch. But all these thoughts would quickly leave Yoda's mind when he spots Palpatine watching this sick ceremony from a distance and then walking into the Jedi Temple. And immediately upon seeing this, Yoda would request Bail to take him closer to the temple, to a very specific location near the temple, which wasn't being monitored. Bail would of course do this for Yoda, but upon asking Yoda why he wanted to be there, Yoda wouldn't reveal much, simply telling Bail that the less he knows, the safer he would be. And before he could say anything in response, Yoda would also tell Bail that Bail should not come back for Yoda, and that he, Yoda, will end this tonight. Hearing this, Bail would consider asking Yoda what his plans are, but knowing the Jedi Master, Bail would simply stand there in silence and watch Yoda disappear into the dark. So the reason why Yoda wanted to be taken here was because there was a secret entrance to the Jedi Temple here. So side note, this is the same secret entrance that Jocasta Nu uses to enter the temple after Order 66. And with Sidious now walking around the temple as if he owns the place, Yoda could not have asked for a better opportunity to end Sidious. And with this singular goal in mind, Yoda would enter the temple, which had been his home for hundreds of years, in search of Sidious. So a little earlier to this, Sidious would watch as the lightsabers of all the Jedi burned, marveling at his grand plan and its complete success. But soon, Sidious would make his way into the Jedi Temple, and as he strolled through the halls of the Jedi Temple, Palpatine would sense, through the Force, the pain and suffering of all the Jedi that died in the temple during Operation Nightfall, which was of course led by Darth Vader. All had proceeded as per his designs, Sidious would think, but there still remained a problem, and this problem had a name: Padme Amidala. From a certain point of view, Padme Amidala was Sidious's biggest weapon against the Jedi, because without Padme, Sidious would not have been able to so easily at least turn Anakin to the dark side. And why is she now a problem to Sidious? Well, the reason Anakin turned to the dark side was because Sidious offered a way to save Padme from certain death. And this was now a problem because of the following. So Sidious's master, Darth Plagueis, had indeed learned the ability to influence the midichlorians to bring back someone from death. Sidious had witnessed this firsthand when Plagueis repeatedly killed and resurrected Darth Venemus, who was a Sith who was trained in the ways of the Sith by Plagueis' master, Darth Tenebrous. So Sidious wasn't lying when he told Anakin that Darth Plagueis could keep people from dying. But the problem was that before learning how to use this power from Plagueis, Sidious killed Plagueis. Roughly 13 years ago at this point, the night before he was made Supreme Chancellor. So Sidious didn't exactly know how to keep one from dying. And so that was Sidious's problem with Padme Amidala, but Sidious was honest with Anakin about that, telling Anakin that together he and Anakin, or Lord Vader, could rediscover this lost Sith ability. But again, the problem was that surely this rediscovery of this lost ability could not be accomplished before Padme gave birth. So side note, in Anakin's visions, he sees Padme dying in childbirth, and in the original timeline, Padme goes into labor no long after the events on Mustafar. And this would imply that, even in the best case scenario, Anakin and Sidious only had weeks, if not days, to rediscover a lost Sith ability. This was of course not enough time to do that. So as for why Anakin didn't think about this when he betrayed Mace Windu, Sidious would reason that, at that moment, Anakin was not in a position to do any thinking. Anakin was a hopeless man who at that point saw in Sidious one last glimmer of hope of being able to save his dying wife from certain death. And Anakin of course could not let Mace Windu destroy this one last hope that he had. But what if Anakin comes to find that this hope was hollow? What if Padme Amidala dies? That was ultimately Sidious's problem with Padme. But the cunning Darth Sidious had devised a solution in such a scenario. So Sidious's plan, if Padme were to die, was to convince Lord Vader that there was still a way that Padme could be resurrected through the dark side. So side note, this ability to resurrect someone through the dark side actually does exist. In fact, it is what Darth Momin does in the Marvel Vader comic, Fortress Vader. So essentially, Sidious would believe that Padme Amidala, even if she dies, would still serve as a tool that he, Sidious, could use to control Lord Vader. But completely derailing Sidious's train of thought, he would sense a presence all too familiar to Sidious, and it is also at this moment that Anakin finally contacts Sidious from the Grand Republic medical facility. So Anakin would tell Sidious that he needs Sidious's help, but before Anakin could finish the sentence, Sidious would tell Anakin that he, Sidious, was in danger, and that Anakin needs to immediately get to the Jedi Temple. Anakin would try to ask what danger Sidious is in, but then the transmission would abruptly end, as though something happened to the comlink. This would cause Anakin to panic. His wife was in the hospital, and now the man who offered to save her life was also in some sort of unknown danger. What danger was he in? Could it be a surviving Jedi? But what Jedi could possibly pose a danger to Darth Sidious? Anakin would ask himself. But then, quickly realizing that his speculation wasn't helping, Anakin would decide to go to the temple. And so Anakin would take one last look at the unconscious Padme as she was being cared for by medical droids, and would rush out to the former Jedi temple to save Sidious from whatever danger he was in. But not really because Anakin cared for Sidious, but rather because Sidious could be the only way to save Padme. But as he rushed out, Anakin would fail to notice one of the medical droids that were trying to approach him, possibly to say something to Anakin. So back in the Jedi Temple, as soon as Sidious told Anakin that he was in danger, Sidious's comlink would fly out of his hand, hit the wall, and break. Sidious would then see what seemed like a flash of green light in his peripheral vision, and moments later, Sidious would hear the sound of something falling behind him, and he would turn around to see that his two personal red guards are both lying on the floor without their heads, and next to their bodies would be Master Yoda. Master Yoda would then, using the Force, close the main doors leading out of the hall that Sidious was in, or rather, Sidious was trapped in with Yoda. Sidious would then draw his own crimson saber and ask Yoda if he's come to reminisce. And to respond to this, Yoda would not use his words, instead his actions. So Yoda would then lunge at Sidious, and the two would begin a duel. Anakin Skywalker's heart would be beating out of his chest as he got off his speeder near the now fallen Jedi Temple, the closest thing he ever had to a home. Anakin had, of course, already notified the Coruscant security that Palpatine was in danger, and because of this warning by Anakin, clone troopers were already looking for the Emperor, especially since they could not reach the Emperor through a comlink. And not too long in their searching, the clone troopers came upon what seemed like a closed-off section of the Jedi Temple. The clones then tried to break through the doors to this section of the hallways, but unfortunately these were no simple doors. Instead, these huge heavy doors were built to withstand every known force of nature basically, and they had managed to do so for over 25,000 years at this point. So in essence, the clone troopers were having a very hard time trying to get through these doors. So when Anakin was on his way to the temple, he was informed of all these developments. Is Sidious alright? Is he already dead? All these thoughts would be going through Anakin's mind, and then his comlink would go off, which would do nothing but annoy Anakin. And at this point, Anakin would stop, take a deep breath, and would choose to ignore his comlink and the many thoughts that were going through his head, because he would realize that what he needed to do right now was to focus on saving Sidious from whatever danger he was in. And so Anakin, after getting a grip on himself, would rush in to save Sidious. And as this was happening, Master Yoda and Sidious would be fighting each other with every bit of power they had, each looking for an opening in the other's defenses to cut the other down. And as the duel went on, Sidious sensed in Yoda the strong, focused desire to eliminate the Sith at any cost. And in an effort to maybe throw Yoda off focus, Sidious would use his most powerful weapon, his words. And so Sidious would tell Yoda that if it weren't for Yoda's arrogance, the Jedi Order and every single Jedi would not have died so easily. And Sidious would go even further, telling Yoda that Sidious should thank Yoda, because in a way, Yoda helped Sidious more than Count Dooku ever did. But these words, of course, had no effect on the 900-year-old Master Yoda. He had already accepted his mistakes, and was here now to correct these mistakes as much as he could. And Sidious too would of course immediately notice this, and having done so, Sidious would change tactics. Some moments after, Sidious would block one of Yoda's strikes, and then jump away from Yoda, creating some space between the two. And as Sidious did so, Yoda would lunge after Sidious, at which point Sidious would drop his lightsaber, and would blast Yoda with Force lightning. The Sith carried lightsabers to mock the Jedi, that's what Sidious believed, and at this moment, Sidious decided to place all his faith in that belief, in his abilities with the Force, and so Sidious directed all his hatred at Yoda in the form of Force lightning. But what perhaps Sidious didn't realize is that just because the Jedi carried lightsabers didn't mean that they couldn't use other weapons. A Jedi's strength, of course, came from their connection to the Force. Even if one were to say twirl 4 lightsabers at once, they wouldn't be a Jedi if they lacked a connection to the Force. And Master Yoda, of course, had a very strong connection to the Force. And Master Yoda, realizing that he cannot fully block Sidious's lightning with his lightsaber, would opt instead to use Sidious's own power against him. So to that end, Yoda would begin absorbing Sidious's Force lightning, just like he did in their previous duel. And after absorbing a sufficient quantity of Sidious's Sith lightning, Yoda would direct it right back at Sidious, which would send Sidious flying across the room. And following this, without wasting a moment, Yoda leapt after Sidious, calling his green lightsaber back into his hand and igniting it, all in an effort to end Sidious right then and there. And on top of that, Yoda also knew that he had very little time to deal with Sidious. Some moments earlier, outside, Anakin Skywalker would finally reach the doors that the clones couldn't get through. And once there, Anakin would sense the presence of Sidious and also Master Yoda on the other side of the door. And this realization would make Anakin even more scared. And following this, without even thinking, Anakin would call upon the Force and try to lift this heavy door, with Anakin's fear and anger providing him strength. And as Anakin began opening this door, he would hear what sounded like Force lightning. And even though Anakin couldn't see Sidious or Yoda, he could still sense their presence in the Force, and Anakin could tell that both of them were doing everything they can to kill each other. And at this point, thoughts of Padme would again enter Anakin's mind, and a voice inside Anakin's head would tell him that she's about to die. and this thought or voice inside his head would give Anakin the strength he required to lift the door. And so Anakin lifted this huge door open, and when he did so, everything felt to Skywalker as if it was going in slow motion. In front of Anakin, he saw Master Yoda lunging at Sidious with his green lightsaber, and Anakin could also sense that Sidious would not be able to block the strike from Yoda. And seeing this, Anakin's mind would panic, he wouldn't know what to do, so again, without even thinking, Skywalker would ignite his own lightsaber and move towards Master Yoda with all strength, all speed, with the only goal of striking down Master Yoda before Yoda kills Sidious. And after doing so, when he could process information again, Anakin will look at what he did, and he would find that his lightsaber had gone through Master Yoda's head. Master Yoda was so focused on Sidious, he forgot that Anakin was also coming at him. But this joy of having killed the 900-year-old Master Yoda would soon diminish when Anakin notices that before he killed Yoda, Yoda had separated Sidious's head from his body. Anakin was maybe just half a second too late to save Sidious. He should have pushed Yoda away from Sidious instead of trying to attack him with his lightsaber, Anakin would tell himself. But none of that mattered. Sidious and Yoda are both dead. And as Anakin was trying to process everything, all the clone troopers that were standing outside would walk in through the door that Anakin opened. And once they do so, they would tell Anakin that they need to contain the area and that he needed to leave. But Anakin would simply stand there, unresponsive. He couldn't process everything that was going on. But slowly, Anakin's mind would begin registering a noise. It was coming from his comlink, and this call was coming from the Grand Republic medical facility. And noticing where the transmission was coming from, Anakin would answer this call, and on the other side would be the medical droid that was treating Padme. And so, as soon as Anakin sees the droid, he would ask the droid what happened in a frantic tone. And to this, the droid would say, emulating human emotions as much as it could, that he, the droid, had tried contacting Anakin before, but Anakin wasn't answering. And that right after Anakin left, Padme Amidala had gone into labor, and that she had twins. And as soon as Anakin heard this, his face would go pale. The only part about the droid said that would register in Anakin's mind would be the fact that Padme had gone into labor. That's how he saw her die, in childbirth. And so, following what the droid said, Anakin would ask the droid if Padme is safe, if she's alright. Two ways, the droid would tell Anakin that, due to reasons that they couldn't explain, Padme died because her body just gave out and became unresponsive to treatment, almost as if she somehow lost the will to live. And after saying all this, the droid would also apologize to Anakin for contacting him repeatedly on his comlink. The droid would say that he did that because Padme, as she died, kept screaming and calling out to Anakin for help. So in the months following this incident, several things would happen. Padme and Sidious's funerals would be held on Naboo, and as for Padme's children, they would be taken in by Padme's family. Because even though they were his own children, Anakin didn't want them anywhere near him. Because in Anakin's twisted mind, after him, these two children were responsible for Padme losing her life. And so Anakin would not object to Luke and Leia being taken in by Padme's family. And on top of that, no one really knew that Padme and Anakin were married, because their marriage ceremony was done in secret. And Anakin didn't care to reveal the secret. And as for the remaining Jedi, eventually Bail Organa and the likes of Mon Mothma would be successful in convincing the Senate that all the Jedi should not be punished for the wrongdoings of 4 Jedi Masters. And with Palpatine not being there to stop any of this, the Purge of the Jedi would be stopped by the Senate. Following which, many Jedi would return to Coruscant to testify before the Senate, which would include Ahsoka Tano, who would inform the Senate of how Palpatine was secretly Darth Sidious, a Sith, an ancient enemy of the Jedi, who orchestrated the Clone Wars with the sole intention of taking control of the Republic and destroying the Jedi Order. And Ahsoka would also include details about the inhibitor chips and how Palpatine used the clones to achieve this goal. All of this might not immediately convince the Senate that Palpatine orchestrated the Clone Wars, but it would help launch an investigation into Palpatine to discover the truth. And this investigation would eventually be successful, given how Count Dooku, Grievous, and Palpatine himself are all gone, meaning that there was no one left to impede the investigation. And what would make things easier would be the testimony of Darth Maul himself, who would testify before the Senate as to who Palpatine really was after some serious convincing. But ultimately, when everything is said and done, due to the efforts of many, including Bail and Ahsoka, the Senate would eventually discover that the Jedi were innocent and that Palpatine pretty much played everyone. And after this discovery, the Jedi would be invited back to Coruscant and would be allowed to train new Jedi. And so, the Jedi Order would restart with the few Jedi that remained, which would of course include the likes of Ahsoka. And eventually, the two children of the late Padme Amidala would also be inducted into this new Jedi Order. But what about Anakin? Well, Anakin wouldn't really care about any of this, because Anakin, no long after Padme's death, would again become convinced that through the Force, Padme can be brought back. And the reason for this was Anakin went into the Jedi Temple archives after the death of Palpatine and Padme. And the reason he was able to do this so easily was because Anakin still held a very high rank in the Republic military. And so, in the Temple archives, Anakin would eventually find the Mask of Darth Mormon, who would tell Anakin that all things are possible through the dark side, even bringing back someone from death. Which, like I said earlier in the video, is true. Mormon does do that in the Vader comics. And so, Anakin Skywalker would leave Coruscant with the Mask of Darth Mormon in an effort to bring back his long-lost wife. And as for what that endeavor would bring, well, that is a question I hope I'm able to answer in some future video. Anyways, thank you for watching, and have a good day, or night, or whenever you're watching this.